Welcome to Through a Glass Dimly, a podcast where I talk about the truth and the lies we believe. This podcast is sponsored by Sophie's Dream Incorporated, a nonprofit to help people heal from trauma and PTSD through the arts. If you find this podcast beneficial to you, please consider donating to www.sophiesdream.org. SOPHIESDREAM.org. Thank you for your generous tax-deductible donation and enjoy the podcast. Note: as I produce this podcast, I want to clarify that I am not using my real name. I'm using a pen name to protect the innocent I will be interviewing in the future. I'm also protecting myself from any danger caused from speaking the truth that some do not want exposed. This podcast is not intended to replace any doctor recommendation or advice. I am just relaying stories of what happened in my life and others, and how I eventually healed from trauma naturally, and also help others heal. Thank you. Somewhere over the rainbow. This is a topic that will be a series of a few episodes. I will discuss my experience in the film industry, others' perception of what it is really like, and how many times we think that happiness is somewhere else. It is human nature to think, somewhere over the rainbow, all my dreams will come true. But are you really sure about that? I remember working for Sony Pictures on a big Hollywood feature film. Here I was, my career dreams had come true. On the outside, it was so glamorous. From the perspective of the movie or television screen, it's all glitz and diamonds. Major celebrity actors, glamorous premieres, fans wanting autographs. However, someone who hasn't been involved in making a film has no idea how much work it takes and how much you have to sacrifice to have a career in Hollywood. Sony Pictures was the old Columbia Pictures lot where they filmed many great features like Gone with the Wind. I remember passing by the soundstage where they filmed The Wizard of Oz. Filmmakers made it look like a magical place in the movie, but if you look inside, it just is a big warehouse with a bunch of painted sets. It's an illusion. The magic happened by the hands of all the creative artists. They created the fantasy world from their talents, hard work, and sacrifice. Very, very hard work. Very, very long hours. And more sacrifice than people could ever imagine. During filming, most people work at least 12 hours a day, but it can be much longer. Due to the time in having to construct sets and hang lights and equipment for shooting, they will choose to film as long as they possibly can so they can reduce the amount of rebuilding the same scenes numerous times. If you are an actor or actress, your workday might start out at 6 a.m. for hair and makeup, but you have to wake up and drive to work, which might take an hour or longer for the commute. Your wrap time might end at sunset, or if there are evening scenes to shoot, it could proceed late into the night or early morning. Then you have to stay awake enough to drive home, which might take another hour. Go to sleep and wake up and do it all again the next day. I know a few friends who are actors who often have call times at 3 a.m. If filming on location, they set up little trailers for the actors and crew to sleep in, where they get very few hours of rest, and a living space smaller than a lot of their automobiles sitting in their driveway at home. How do you fit in time for your significant other, spouse, your children, your dog, family events, or emergencies, or especially even have time for decent rest? Your life can literally become your work. It can be very isolating and hard on the body, mind, and spiritual health. Not only are there long hours, but it's also lonely at the top. There are many celebrities who find themselves so trapped, having become an idol that is worshipped by others. Down deep, many think and know full well they are not perfect enough to be anyone's idol at all. They're just human like everyone else. But suddenly they aren't allowed to have any flaws. Every mistake or mishap is written or called out on social media and the news. They are prisoners in their own home. They don't dare go to the grocery store without full makeup on. Many of the, quote, friends that surround them are opportunistic and are only hanging out with them to get something from them, whether it be money, favors, or to look good to their friends. So be careful what you wish for. You might say, I want to be famous. Do you really? Do you really want someone telling you where you have to be every second of the day? Do you really want to live isolated in your own house, or on tour for years at a time living out of a bus, or afraid to look out of your window for fear of the paparazzi shooting a picture of you in your PJs? Do you really want people to think you are too good for just a normal, simple relationship and life? When I think of the cost of being a celebrity, I think about Judy Garland, a girl from Grand Rapids, Minnesota, starting in show business at a very young age. She was originally an unwanted child. Her parents were poor with 2 children already. Their hopes of becoming vaudeville stars had been unsuccessful up until that time. Her mother, Ethel, tried everything to abort her. Ethel's husband even reached out to a family friend to arrange for his wife to have an abortion. Instead, this friend insisted Ethel have the baby. Judy's parents, being struggling vaudeville actors, forced the children into performing for money. They soon discovered that Judy was the most talented of the children and became the favorite. She was used as a slave for the purposes of meeting her parents' financial and personal goals. They started giving Judy drugs as early as 3 or 4 years old. Ethel would give Judy speed or amphetamines during the day to keep up with the rigorous work schedule, and then give her sleeping pills at night to counteract the stimulants. For Judy Garland, it was a vicious cycle that only grew worse. Judy Garland isn't the only celebrity or child whose life ended in a tragic nightmare. There are countless other parents of child celebrities who have given their children stimulants to keep them focused and stay on task. Michael Jackson is one example, but I'm sure there have been others who took that secret to the grave when they eventually succumbed to an early death due to an overdose or tragic suicide. Unfortunately, this is happening among children whose parents either have high standards for them or the children have experienced early trauma that has affected their ability to focus. In addition, many victims of sexual abuse as children were drugged repeatedly during their abuse, causing them to become reliant on a drug as a form of escape. In some cases, ADHD meds are being abused in order to keep children focused on meeting the impossible demands by their parents or a regimented school schedule. Adderall is a common drug given to children diagnosed with ADHD. It is an amphetamine, a stimulant that controls the central nervous system, and it is an addictive drug that requires increasing the dose as the body builds up a tolerance, just like a street drug. The drugs keep you working, but eventually the drugs stop working, and you need to take more and more. With the brain being constantly stimulated, another drug, which is a depressant, is used for sleep. So the roller coaster begins. Stimulant to depressant, back to stimulant again. Your body no longer functioning normally because it starts relying on the chemicals it's taking to function. This is what is called drug dependency. This is what ends up becoming a habit, a bad habit. It is especially tragic when introducing opiates or other drugs to the developing brain of a child, for the child's brain chemistry ends up not developing properly. If we treat our bodies the way we should with proper rest, play, nutrition, water, our bodies naturally create healthy balances of hormones, endorphins, dopamine, etc., to be able to handle the different circumstances we may encounter in life, whether it be avoiding danger or feeding hunger or needing rest. The natural endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin can be perfectly balanced if we treat our bodies and minds the way they were designed. With no time to rest, your brain and body are in a constant state of exhaustion, and the only way to keep up the pace of the slave drivers around you is to keep taking drugs for the desired effect. The side effects, of course, are inevitable. These psychological side effects can be paranoia, fear, depression, violent or manic behavior, hallucinations, and insomnia. Physical side effects can include blurred vision, dizziness, lack of energy, and a damaged immune system, which can lead to chronic and major illnesses, cancer, organ damage, or even death by illness, suicide, or drug overdose. It becomes a hamster wheel that keeps going faster and faster. You are trapped with no way to escape the pace. Celebrities make big sacrifices for big paychecks, but sometimes the paychecks and residuals just aren't enough. Even though Judy was making millions, she was always in debt. I believe that she trusted many people who were draining her dry of her finances and weren't keeping up with the tax return filings. She also probably could not manage her finances or life due to the effects of her addiction on her brain, insomnia, and her rigorous work schedule. This is what happens to many in the business. They are so busy working that they trust others who are not trustworthy to manage their finances. It happened to singer Brenda Lee and child actor Johnny Whitaker. In recent years, major celebrities with great careers have faced embarrassing financial woes, like Nicolas Cage and 50 Cent, a working actor since he was 6. Joey Lawrence, with 3 successful sitcoms under his belt, had to file bankruptcy. They work all these long hours for all those years, and their debts outpace their income. Of all the creative people I know, the truly talented people, be it painters, actors, singers, writers, inventors, they don't do it for the money. They do it because they want to make people happy, or make others' lives easier in some way. Or sadly, they may do it because they seek the love from millions because they didn't get that love at home. Many have been programmed as young children to have all of their self-worth dependent on their performance and the acceptance and accolades of their performance. If there is any lull in that, their self-worth is completely crushed. Look at Heather Locklear. It seems all of her worth was tied into her looks, and as she grew older, her self-worth faded along with her beauty. She found out love only runs skin deep in Hollywood. Judy couldn't emotionally accept her last show being canceled. Some of her friends that were interviewed said she took it very personally. This is common with children of abuse. When something goes wrong, they immediately take the blame because they were blamed for everything that went wrong when they were children. They hide this blame by blaming others around them, even though it's obvious their lives reflect their self-sabotaging beliefs. Her only source of income gone, as well as her purpose, left her hopeless and homeless. She ended up going back to the grueling schedule of touring to survive financially and to get enough money to have a stable place for her children to live. She was touring in London at the time of her untimely death due to an accidental overdose. Her complete exhaustion was no mystery to anyone who knew her, and having been reliant on so many stimulants and depressants from childhood, her body was no longer able to function normally except by artificial means. If one has had insomnia for any length of time, it can make anyone depressed and exhausted. With her 5 marriages ending in divorce, her perception of herself was one of defeat, even though other people saw her as an amazing talent. It's obvious from her self-deprecating behavior that she didn't focus on all she had accomplished, but she tended to focus on her failures instead. This is because she probably was programmed to think that way as a very young child. Her performances were providing for the family. She wasn't allowed to fail, or take a day off, or just be a normal kid. What happened to Judy is not an isolated incident in Hollywood. Similar situations have happened to others in the entertainment industry. I knew someone who worked with Robin Williams on his last television series, The Crazy Ones. He said he was so devastated by his show's cancellation, he took it as a personal barometer for how everyone viewed him and his talents. After a lifetime of success with movies like Mrs. Doubtfire, Good Will Hunting, and Patch Adams, he still thought himself a failure, and unfortunately would be dead within 3 months' time. Rather than looking at all the things he succeeded in, he focused on the failure of his last project and placed his worth in that. That is the problem with seeking approval from man. There's a saying in Hollywood, you are only as good as your last project. Yet a view of someone's own worth at the time of death can often come from the perception they were given as a very young child. With both of his parents working full-time, Robin relied on creativity and humor to get him through the loneliness and feeling abandoned as a child. He found that using humor would give him the attention that he craved. Unfortunately, many times, even the accolades of millions will never substitute for the abandonment and lack of love that the parents were not able to give their own child. We try to seek love from outside sources, and it never seems to be enough. There still is a deep pain that is not filled, and oftentimes drugs, alcohol, and other vices are used to escape this emotional pain. The reality is, life is not about just successes and failures, but about learning experiences, owning responsibility when it is warranted, but not dwelling on the mistake, learning how to do it right the next time. And if you really aren't responsible for the failure in the first place, not taking the blame for it is the first step in healing. The inherent challenges of being a celebrity can cause huge stumbling blocks in trying to navigate just everyday life. However, many celebrities and artists also grew up in abusive homes. According to Ranker.com, there is a long list of very well-known celebrities who grew up in homes of abuse, from Halle Berry to Macaulay Culkin, Christina Aguilera, Charlize Theron, Michael Jackson, even Marilyn Monroe and Bill Clinton. Still, if their childhood wasn't abusive, the artist sometimes fights against the parents for pursuing their dreams rather than going for the career that they think will bring them more money. According to Dr. Bruce Lipton, Ph.D., the most influential programming of the brain of a child occurs from 0 to 6 years old, and from 6 years old on, that person just lives out the programming, whatever it is. We are not merely making cognitive choices in life, but rather reacting and making decisions based on familiarity and habits, whether good or bad. Most creative children show their gifts very early on. Oftentimes, there seems to be two extremes that happen. The first extreme is that children are discouraged from pursuing their artistic talents and are made to focus on more academic goals that will lead to what their parents believe will be a more financially stable way of life. The second extreme is that they are used as objects to fulfill the financial and social goals of the parents. This is when parents live vicariously through their child, attempting to fulfill their own failed goals through their child's success. In effect, they are meeting their own emotional needs by making their child famous. A child who has been raised to have all of their decisions made for them and has been made to feel their opinion is of no worth is a perfect bait for falling victim to the rigorous schedule of a celebrity or artist in the film industry. They have been primed from childhood to be a slave to their master. Before, it may have been their militant parents, but as an adult, it becomes a movie executive or an agent or manager or demanding boss. Now, I personally know some agents and managers that are wonderful people. In any industry, there are the good and the bad. But the entertainment industry has a lot of people who are money hungry, and they will do everything they can to get a hold of as much of it as possible, and at whatever cost. Unfortunately, the pawns used in their scheme are usually the creative artist. They are left with empty pockets, exhausted, while the top execs laugh all the way to the bank. Judy was programmed as a child to have her only purpose be to make her master happy. whether it was her mother or her agent or boss. She had no voice except to sing what they wanted her to sing and to say what they wanted her to say. Everything was scripted. She was trapped in a prison, and to keep up the charade and retain her energy, she escaped into the damaging cycle of drugs just to survive. Like a workhorse, the studios took on the same role as her mom by giving her drugs to keep her on task. Do you think that does not happen today? Think again. Look at Michael Jackson and others. Drew Barrymore, Amy Winehouse, Gary Coleman, Macaulay Culkin, and many others who were child stars made their way to depending on drugs and alcohol to either escape their life or keep them alert enough to meet all the scheduling demands put on them. Instead of blaming the movie directors, bosses, or showbiz moms for getting the child addicted, they just pay crooked doctors now to dispense the drugs. Some handler hired does the dirty work for them. Every now and again, you hear of some celebrity suddenly in the hospital who passed out from exhaustion. Why? Because many times the schedule is so brutal and they are given no time to rest or relax, or even have a moment to themselves. Possibly their short time in the hospital is the only privacy away from their masters that they can get. Yet many times, hospitals treat exhaustion with more mind-altering pharmaceuticals. Sometimes the exhaustion hospital stay is actually covering up an accidental overdose or mental breakdown due to stress. Where does a person in such a position in Hollywood go to escape? No longer are there good friends there to monitor the situation. The manager, boss, agent, or overbearing parent isolates the victim so they can't hear anyone else's voice but their master's. This is what is done in an abusive relationship within a marriage or family, but it is also done in the corporate world and entertainment industry, or anywhere in fact. Entire countries have been involved with abuse by the leader. This rigorous work schedule doesn't just happen to the stars in Hollywood. There's a whole team of artists and technicians who work in the entertainment industry, from gaffers and prop masters to the people who create the digital visual effects. I was one of those people behind the scenes, working on big-budget films and television shows for major Hollywood studios. However, my Hollywood journey started out a lot differently than Judy's, and although I grew up in an abusive home and experienced much of the same challenges concerning the impossible work schedule in Hollywood, and realizing many of those rainbow dreams I had were not even close to reality, my story was a happy ending. My hope for the podcast is not just to share the ugly truth, but to also share hope and a solution for true happiness and contentment that can't be found in just one place. At least not here on earth. So this is the end of part 1. Join me next time where I continue to tell stories, discuss my life and experience in the industry, as well as use encouraging words of perseverance, hope, and healing. I welcome any kind of constructive feedback you have, and I'm so grateful for the people who have contacted me, who have been so willing to share their own testimonies. And with permission, I will share some of those on future podcasts. Feel free to contact me at feedback@throughaglassdimly.com. Your tax-deductible donations at www.sophiesdream.org are so much appreciated and help me produce this podcast as well as help others heal who have experienced trauma and abuse. Thank you and bless you. Until next time. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved. Reproduction of any portion prohibited except by permission. Contact feedback@throughaglassdimly.com. Thank you.